Nathaniel Greer was 37 years old when he packed two bags, checked the combination on the safe one final time, and walked out of his own house on a Tuesday morning in October. He did not slam the door. He pulled it shut with the same patience he brought to everything. The patience of a man who had spent his professional life working with material that could not be argued with once it's set. By that evening, Simone had called three of her closest friends. He knew this because he knew Simone. By the following morning, word had moved through her social circle in the particular way it moves when women who have been waiting a long time finally get to say what they have been holding. She had used the words finally gone. She had used the word free. She had, within 72 hours, begun speaking about the house as though it belonged entirely to her. What she had not done, in any of those hours of calls and celebrations, was walk to the master bedroom closet and open the safe he had left mounted to the wall behind his winter coats. It was 14 inches wide, matte black, combination locked. She had seen it for years and treated it the way she treated everything she didn't understand. She ignored it. She had no idea the house she was celebrating in had been transferred to an irrevocable family trust 18 months prior. She had no idea she had signed a document acknowledging that trust 7 years ago on an evening when she was more interested in what was for dinner than what she was initialing. The trust documents were in the safe. The attorney's letter was in the safe. The certified deed was in the safe. $1.8 million worth of what she believed was shared territory was, in every legal sense that mattered, entirely his. She was going to find out. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from, and subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The crew arrived at the Shelby County job site at 6:45, same as every morning. Nathaniel Greer was already there, coffee in hand, boots in the mud near the corner stakes where the foundation pour was scheduled to begin at 7. He had reviewed the specs the night before, the rebar layout, the mix ratio, the load requirements the structural engineer had confirmed on Thursday. He knew concrete the way a man knows something he has worked with long enough to feel it in his hands. The weight, the patience it demanded, the irreversible nature of it once it's set. What was poured was poured. What was set was set. There was no renegotiating with it later. It ran Greer Civil and Infrastructure out of a small office in Midtown Memphis. 9 years into the business, with a crew of 11 and a reputation for foundation work that held. They poured the invisible parts of buildings, the slabs beneath parking structures, the retaining systems behind school buildings, the footings that held up the facades of things other people would eventually take credit for. It was not work that made the news. It was work that made the news possible because without it, nothing stood at level for very long. His mother, Dorothy Greer, had said to him once, her hand flat on his workbench the way she placed her hand on things she meant, "Son, you pour a bad foundation and everything above it is a lie. You pour a good one and everything above it is real. That is the only rule that matters." She had been talking about concrete. She had been talking about everything. She had passed 18 months before this story began. In the house on Peabody Avenue where Nathaniel had grown up and where the garden his father had planted still came up in the spring without being asked. In her estate, she had left him the house, a property she had held in trust for years, following the quiet counsel of an attorney who had told her it was the right structure for a family asset she wanted to pass cleanly. The matte black safe in the master bedroom closet, the one Nathaniel had mounted to the wall himself, the fall after Dorothy died, had held those trust documents from the day he put them in. He had closed the combination and then gone about his life, which was the only way he knew how to handle something he had built correctly. He had met Simone at a birthday dinner in Cooper Young 6 years ago. She was charming and quick and had a way of making a room feel organized around her attention. She had asked what he did, and he had told her, and she had said, with what seemed at the time like genuine curiosity, that she had never dated someone who built things from the ground up. He had married her 2 years later in a ceremony at a venue he had helped renovate. Their first year in the Peabody house had been good. She had learned the neighborhood, she had hosted dinners, she had come to job sites twice to understand what he actually did, and had stood in the mud in the wrong shoes and asked real questions. He had believed, in that first year, that they were building toward the same thing. What he had learned slowly, in the way you learn things that are never said directly, was that Simone's relationship to what he built had always been about what it provided, rather than how it stood. The house was beautiful and in a good neighborhood, and she loved it for exactly those reasons. Without particular interest in the 18 months of evenings and weekends Nate had spent restoring it from the condition Dorothy had left it in. She photographed the finished kitchen for her social media and received the compliments warmly. She did not ask who replaced the subflooring. Then came the signs. They assembled over months, the way water damage assembles, quietly, in the places you were not watching, until the surface changed and you could not honestly say you had not seen it. A name? Brandon Hale. Appearing at dinner parties more frequently than the law of coincidence could support. Weekend trips, whose explanations covered fewer hours than the trips required. A particular brightness in Simone when she returned from those trips that was neither for him nor about him. An energy that had a destination, and the destination was not the house. The perfume she began wearing on Thursdays, that she had not worn before and did not mention buying. The way she left, behind a closed door, at something he was not part of. A full, easy laugh that he had not heard directed at him in a very long time. He had noticed. He had not yet moved. It found the razor on a Tuesday in late August, in the back of the medicine cabinet behind the shelf she never used. It was a men's brand he did not own, sitting in a travel case he had never purchased. He held it in his hand for a long moment. He placed it back exactly where he found it. Aside nothing that evening, he poured a glass of water. He watched part of the news. He went to bed. His hands did not shake. He began with the bank statements. 3 years of them, pulled from the joint account portal on a Thursday afternoon while Simone was at a fitness class she had begun attending more regularly since early spring. What emerged, organized by date and amount, was a pattern he recognized from his work, the kind of regular paced movement that indicated planning rather than impulse. 29 withdrawals over 22 months, amounts ranging from $350 to $1,900. A total of $30 million moved from the joint account to a savings account in Simone's name alone, at a bank he had not known she used. His face remained perfectly calm. He found a hotel receipt from East Memphis folded into the pocket of a jacket she had draped over the kitchen chair, a boutique property near the river. Dated on a Saturday she had described as a friend's birthday celebration in Collierville. Collierville was 20 miles in the opposite direction. The receipt showed a room for 2 nights. It had been on a job site in Jackson that entire weekend. He cross-referenced the withdrawal dates against Simone's travel using the shared calendar they had maintained for 6 years. Of the 29 transfers, 17 had occurred within 3 days of a trip whose itinerary was either partial or absent entirely. He went back further, pulled text message logs from his own phone where Simone had mentioned her plans, noted the discrepancies in what she said she was doing, and where the ATM receipts showed she had been. He built this into the spreadsheet as a separate column. He labeled the column simply Stated versus Actual. The total picture covered 22 months and told the same story at every point in the timeline, with the same 2 characters and the same direction of travel. She had been planning something, or living inside something, for close to 2 years. He moved with the same deliberate calm that defined all his actions when the stakes were structural. He photographed the razor. He photographed the hotel receipt. He downloaded the full 3-year account history and forwarded it to his personal email. It built the spreadsheet in 2 hours on a Saturday morning while Simone was at brunch, annotated in the contractor's shorthand he used on all his project documentation. Precise, level, without editorializing. He opened the folder on his laptop he had named Dorothy, after his mother, after the house, after the trust she had built before she understood exactly how necessary it would prove to be. He added the final documents. Then he picked up his phone and called Vera Colston. "We're ready," he said. "Let's move." Vera Colston had practiced family law in Memphis for 19 years out of an office on Union Avenue that she had owned outright since her 10th year in practice. A deliberate decision. She had once explained to Nate, because she did not like paying rent to people who had no stake in the work. She was small and still, and spoke in the measured register of someone who had permanently allocated her energy toward things that required it. She reviewed the documents across a conference table on a Monday morning. The account statements, the annotated spreadsheet, the hotel receipt, the razor photographs, she read without comment. When she finished, she aligned the pages into a neat stack and placed her pen across them. "Your mother put the house in trust," she said. "Before we were married," Nate said. Before we even met, she transferred the title to the Greer Family Irrevocable Trust in 2015. Her attorney drafted the co-occupancy acknowledgement for Simone's signature when we moved in together. Beta studied the acknowledgement document. Simone signed this. She initialed each page. She did not read the body of the document. She acknowledged that the property was trust-held and not subject to marital claims. Her initials are in the lower right corner of each page. The date is on the signature line. Beta set it down. She looked at the trust deed, then at the acknowledgement, then at Nate. "Mr. Greer," she said, "Simone has had no idea, has never once thought to ask, what is actually in that safe?" "No," Nate said. "She has not." "Leave it," Beta said. "When you go, leave the safe exactly where it is." Real power operated in quiet rooms. His uncle Gerald, Dorothy's youngest brother, a retired school principal who had known Nate his entire life and had the specific quality of being impossible to impress, met him for coffee at a diner in Whitehaven on a Saturday and listened to the complete picture without shifting expression. It had a way of listening that came from 30 years of hearing 12-year-olds explain themselves. Patient, attentive, not moved by delivery. When Nate finished, Gerald wrapped both hands around his mug for a moment. "Your mother always said Simone treated that house like a hotel," Gerald said. "Nice place to stay, not hers to look after." He looked across the table at his nephew. Dorothy knew. That's why she did what she did. She wanted to make sure that when you built something, it stayed yours, that nobody could take it from you in the fine print you hadn't read. Nate was quiet. "She came to me once, about 2 years before she died," Gerald said. "Asked me what I thought about the trust idea. He told her it seemed complicated. She said, 'Gerald, everything complicated is just something simple that people didn't want to deal with at the beginning.'" He shook his head slowly. "She was right about that. She did it for you," Gerald said, "before she even knew she needed to." The forensic accountant Vera retained, confirmed what Nate had already calculated, and added 3 additional findings. Furniture purchases on the joint credit card, charged as home furnishings during 2 weekends when Nate had been at job sites in Jackson and Jonesboro, that did not correspond to any item currently in the Peabody Avenue house. The accountant pulled purchase records from the retailer and confirmed the items had been delivered to a residential address in Germantown. Beta's paralegal confirmed the address belonged to Brendan Hale. The accountant's summary used the precise language of her field: dissipation of marital assets. Pattern of concealment. Verifiable departure from joint account norms spanning 22 months. When the credit card charges were added to the withdrawal history, the total documented dissipation came to just over $36,000. Beta's paralegal, through standard pre-litigation background research, found that Brendan Hale had been through 1 prior marriage. His first wife had filed a formal complaint regarding the misrepresentation of joint assets during their divorce proceedings. The complaint had been administratively dismissed for jurisdictional reasons. The financial outcome of the divorce had not been favorable to the first wife. It had done this before, or something close enough to it that the shape was recognizable. Nate read the summary once. He placed it in the Dorothy folder. By Thursday, it was ready. The filing was complete, the safe was loaded and locked. His 2 bags were already in his truck. He came home that final evening and ate the dinner Simone had made. Baked chicken, a salad. Nothing particular. Thanked her for cooking. Helped clear the plates. Anne watched 40 minutes of television in the living room before going to bed at 10. She had been in a light, pleased mood all week. The particular energy of a person who has been counting down to something. He had matched her conversation and eaten his dinner and said good night. It had always slept well at the end of a project. Once the foundation was poured, everything above it followed. The mediation was scheduled for a Thursday morning at a neutral office in East Memphis, a beige suite on the 2nd floor of an office park designed to accommodate the worst days of people's lives without appearing to know it. Simone arrived in a charcoal blazer and the composed confidence of a woman who has already rehearsed what she expects to collect. Her attorney, a man named Davis, with a reputation for aggressive asset arguments, had a legal pad and the particular energy of someone who believed the first move was usually the winning one. Beta was already seated. Her folder was closed. She had the stillness of someone with nothing to prove before the right moment. Davis walked through Simone's claim methodically, 50% of all jointly held marital assets, including, and here he slowed his pace slightly for emphasis, the primary marital residence at the Peabody Avenue address, recently appraised at $490,000. He slid the appraisal across the table. Beta did not reach for it. Before we discuss the residential property, she said, I want to ask a procedural question. In preparing your client's asset claim, did your firm conduct a title search on the Peabody Avenue property? Davies paused. The property appears in our records as the primary marital. That isn't what I asked, Beta said, with the same pleasant steadiness she used for everything. Did you conduct a title search? The silence that followed had a specific texture. Nate had felt that texture before, standing at a job site where an inspector was about to walk a footing that had been poured to the wrong grade, the moment before the clipboard came up. Beta placed the trust date in the center of the table. Dorothy Greer's name, the transfer date, 2015, the Greer Family Irrevocable Trust, with Nathaniel Greer named as sole successor trustee and beneficiary. Davies read it. He set it down. He picked it up and read it again. Beta placed the co-occupancy acknowledgement beside it. Simone's initials, bottom right, every page, dated 7 years prior. Trust property does not become marital property under Tennessee law by virtue of occupancy, Beta said. Your client's initials are on a document that acknowledges that fact in language that was clear at the time she signed it. She paused. The complete trust documentation, including the original transfer certificate, the trust deed, and a confirming letter from the trust's founding attorney, is in a locked safe in the master bedroom closet of the Peabody Avenue property. Your client has had access to that safe at all times. We are providing certified copies today as a courtesy. Davies asked for a recess. Hay and Simone went into the corridor. Their voices were not audible through the door. They were gone for 20 minutes. Nate sat with Beta in the quiet room and looked through the window at the parking lot below. At a row of Bradford pear trees, planted too close together, their branches grown into each other's space, neither one flourishing. He had seen 100 of those plantings. People chose them because they looked right in the nursery catalog. Nobody checked what the root structure did at maturity. When Davies returned, he returned alone. He came back into the room without Simone and sat down with the composed difficulty of a man who had just been required to substantially revise his understanding of a situation in a corridor outside a beige conference room. He reorganized his legal pad. He uncapped and recapped his pen once. He began a different conversation than the one he had prepared. The house was no longer part of it. What remained was a substantially reduced discussion of the joint account transfers, $30,000 treated as documented dissipation, the furniture charges, the pattern of concealment the accountant had annotated. These were discussed without performance and settled with the efficiency of people who had run out of leverage. Simone did not return to the room. Nate gathered his copies at the end. He stood. She knew the safe was there, he said, addressing the heir more than anyone in particular. She had the combination if she'd ever asked for it. She just never thought to look. He walked out into the October morning. The Bradford pears were the wrong trees for that space. Someone had chosen them because they looked good early, without thinking about what they became. He had always known the difference. 14 months had passed like a foundation cure in winter, patient, invisible, more solid at the end than anyone expected from the outside. Nate's new place was a converted industrial loft in the South Main Arts District. A raw space had renovated across 5 weekends and 2 extended work stretches, with 2 of his crew and a plan he had sketched on graph paper before the first tool touched the wall. The floors were polished concrete. His pour, his finish, his grade. The kitchen island was butcher block he had milled from salvage oak pulled from a renovation job in Crosstown. The south wall was glass, floor to ceiling, and looked out across the neighborhood toward the river on a clear day. He had built a terrace off the south wall from reclaimed steel and composite decking, a platform at the level of the treetops, with a railing he had welded himself on a Saturday in August. He had stood at that railing when it was finished and looked out at the river and thought of nothing in particular. That had been a good afternoon. Greer Civil and Infrastructure had been awarded the largest contract in its 9-year history, a foundation system for a mixed-use development in the medical district. Cuarto, 8 million square feet of precision flatwork, scheduled over 16 months. The project had been noted in the Memphis Business Journal in a brief paragraph that quoted Nate's crew capacity and project timeline. His uncle Gerald had read it and called. Nate had thanked him and gone back to work. Her name was Priya Osei, a licensed structural engineer with the city's Department of Public Works, 38, with a specific quality of attention that came from spending years assessing whether things were built to hold or built to look like they were holding. She had told Nate, on their second evening together, that she could evaluate a building's foundation confidence within 60 seconds of walking through the front door. He had said he could do it in 30. They had argued about this pleasantly for the better part of an hour. He had been glad for it. Simone had received a reduced settlement, the joint account dissipation offset against her claim, the house entirely removed from consideration, the credit card charges itemized and deducted. She was in a one-bedroom apartment in Bartlett, east of the city, farther from the midtown life she had planned to continue inhabiting. Brandon Hale had transferred to a sales territory in Missouri within 3 months of the mediation. Her social circle, which had celebrated her freedom so enthusiastically the previous October, had grown quieter in the months that followed. The group chat had gone dormant sometime in the spring. Nate had heard this from his crew foreman Marcus, who had heard it through a mutual acquaintance and told him over lunch, without ceremony. Nate had listened. He did not go back to it. Bitterness required ongoing maintenance in people who had stopped being worth the upkeep. It was on the loft's south terrace on a Saturday morning in December when Priya came out with 2 mugs and stood beside him at the railing. The river was visible from here on cold, clear mornings, pewter-colored and patient, the way it always was. The city was still waking up below them. "You poured all of this yourself?" she asked, meaning the terrace floor. "Every square foot," he said. She looked at it for a moment with the assessing attention of someone who understood what went into it, who knew what it cost to do a thing right versus what it cost to do a thing over. "It's level," she said. "It should be," Nate said. "I checked the grade 3 times before I poured." She looked out toward the river. "Most people only check once." "Most people," Nate said, "are willing to work with something that's close." She held her mug in both hands. The morning was cold and clear and unhurried. He had built it that way. It was free. It was sound. He had poured accordingly. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.